The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local journalism today at chly.ca/donate. Local news doesn't survive without local support.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. More than a dozen authors, poets, profs, and students spoke at a festival aimed at fostering connections between Palestinian and local literature this past weekend. The second annual Watermelon Seeds Festival of Literature took place at VIU on Saturday. It comes on the heels of an event last spring that took place at the Palestinian Solidarity encampment that had been set up on campus. VIU profs Sonnet Labbe, Craig Taylor, Paul Watkins, and Neil Surkan, who is also Nanaimo's Poet Laureate, were among those presenting. Also in attendance was Palestinian-Canadian author Ziad Saadi, who I spoke with on site prior to the festival.
Hi, my name is Ziad Saadi. I am a Palestinian-Canadian writer and filmmaker from Montreal, currently based in Vancouver.
And can you tell me what brought you out to this festival?
Well, Warren Haiti had reached out to me and told me about the festival, how it started as something in solidarity with the student encampment here, and I thought that was just incredibly inspiring. And seeing something that's centered on Palestinians, which is all too rare, was even more inspiring. And so when I got the invite, I knew I had to do it. Can
you tell me a little bit about what you're going to be sharing with folks here today?
So I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my novel, which came out a little over a month ago, called 3 Parties. It's my first novel, a debut. It's a modern-day retelling of Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, centered on a queer Palestinian refugee.
Now, as you mentioned, this is the second version of this festival. Last year, there was a ton of media attention all around Canada around these student encampment movements and on the issues that they were talking about. How do you feel we are on that front maybe a year later?
Well, I think I know a lot of student encampments have been dismantled, but I still see the spirit of the pro-Palestinian liberation movement among students and young people more generally. I see them no less committed than they ever were and no less inspiring than they ever were. So it's, like I said, it's especially great to be in a forum, in a space like this with people like this.
So you're going to be sharing some words from your novel. Beyond that, is there a kind of a sentiment or a hope you want to communicate with people here today?
Yeah, I definitely want to encourage, especially young people, to keep pushing. The fact that we have been pushing nonstop over the last 2 years of this genocide has been working. It hasn't been working as fast as we would like, but it has been working. And so I really do want to express that encouragement and the gratitude for having gone this far, which we could not have gotten without the students.
So as we're speaking and recording this, it's Saturday, it's October 11th. I'm wondering if you could maybe share your reaction to maybe the latest developments on the kind of geopolitical issue.
Well, I would say, it's important not to stop advocating for Palestinian liberation. I would say recent developments, the announcement of a ceasefire is just the first of many steps towards Palestinian liberation. We should, it's okay to be cautiously optimistic, but definitely not complacent. So as long as we keep going, keep pushing, we will get to where we need to go.
Palestinian-Canadian writer and filmmaker Ziad Saadi speaking with me ahead of the Watermelon Seeds Festival of Literature at Vancouver Island University, which took place Saturday, October 11th. Also speaking at the event was Sara Kishawi, who was involved with the organizing of the Palestinian Solidarity Encampment and was situated on the quad outside the cafeteria at VIU for much of last summer. Last year, Kishawi was suspended for 2 years by the university, a suspension that was upheld by the institution on appeal in March of this year. Kishawi petitioned the BC Supreme Court, seeking that the suspension be set aside. That hearing happened in September, but a decision from the court is still pending. According to VIU's response to the petition, Kishawi was suspended after an investigation substantiated 4 allegations. One, that on May 15th of last year, Kishawi refused requests of authorized employees with respect to accessing a roof that was being closed. 2, that Kishawi was accessing a roof on May 16th after hours and in an unsafe manner. 3, that on June 28th of last year, she disrupted the learning and working environment by occupying the work area of the VIU International and International Admissions staff area and engaged in loud chanting for approximately 2.5 hours. And 4, that she accessed an area of the university where she was not entitled to be and committed vandalism and defacement by physically damaging 2 doors. The documents also state that Kishawi accused a university employee of racial profiling, refused to provide an investigator with straightforward answers to questions, provided answers that were evasive, self-serving, and deceptive, and provided evidence that was simply unbelievable. I spoke with Sara Kishawi about the festival and about her suspension last Saturday.
My name is Sara Kishawi. I am a sociology graduate from Vancouver Island University, currently on suspension for protesting on campus. And I'm a big part of the organizing group for Palestine rallies in Nanaimo and surrounding areas in terms of standing up against genocide and against Canadian complicity in the genocide.
We're going to talk about that suspension a little bit, but maybe first let's lead with what's happening here today as we're having this conversation. There's a literary festival going on here at VIU. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, this is the second annual Watermelon Seas Literature Festival. This was an event that was hosted at the encampment last year and something organized by a professor. We were very grateful and honored to have that type of support from scholars. And it gave us a lot of hope in terms of, standing our ground at the encampment and using our right to protest. And hope in terms of what our mission was, and that was standing up against genocide. At that point, there was a lot of villainizing of the encampment happening by VIU, and we were feeling a little let down. And so this type of event really brought life back into the encampment. It gave us a lot of hope, and we are very happy to see it happening again this year, and hope that it will continue to happen every single year.
Yeah, can you tell me more about the fact that it's the second time this is happening? We're a year out from a lot of developments related to the former encampment that was here. Where do you think things are at? What do you think folks should know about kind of the context of everything that's happened in the last year since the encampment went away?
Mm-hmm. The past year has been as busy as the year before. The year before was very busy on the front lines. There was a lot of actions, and this year it moved a little bit to behind the scenes, and that was being in terms of court petitions that we filed. Well, VIU first filed for an injunction, and so that was a lot of behind the work scene. And then there was a petition filed by us following an investigation that VIU did onto 2 Palestinians on campus. And that was followed, of course, by the suspensions, in which we filed an appeal for, and then we filed a court petition for. And so it feels like a long year, but it also went by really quickly, all at the same time, of course, as the genocide happening in Palestine, and keeping our eyes on the developments there.
So, as you referred to, you were suspended for 2 years by VIU. You graduated last fall. How does this suspension affect you, given that you have graduated from the school?
Right. I mean, first and foremost, it's a question of why VIU would suspend a graduated student. And so it was a lot of internal, struggles in trying to understand what exactly did we do wrong. There's a genocide going on. Students are absolutely outraged, not only about the genocide, but about our complicity in it. And VIU chose to go down this route, right? And so there was a lot of internal struggles with that. And of course, with the suspension comes long-term implications. Students that are suspended, or anyone who is suspended really, will face long-term difficulties in getting further education or getting employment. That's one of the effects of the suspension. It's something that I have to disclose every time I fill out an application for post-secondary or postgraduate applications. They always ask, have you been suspended? And they ask for why. And so for VIU to do that and put that pressure when really they have no valid reason for the suspension is actually quite alarming. And of course, there are the implications of what universities can do to limit freedom of expression on campus. Campuses have for a very long time been a place for freedom of expression, protests against a lot of other issues. And so when when institutions and their administration are given this power to limit the freedom of expression, depending on if they agree with the issue or not, it's quite alarming and sets a very alarming precedent for future actions for any cause, not just an anti-genocide one. And so there is that as well. And of course, VIU's online transcript systems, the student record, all of that my access is withheld. And so I cannot access my transcripts online. And they seem to say in the appeal, actually, in the appeal hearing, I had mentioned that, and they said that shouldn't be the case. And so that brought up two questions. First, why is it the case then? Because I showed them on my laptop, like, it's the case. I don't have access. And two, why did you suspend me then? Right? Why, what are you trying to gain with this suspension? Right? And so, as of now, last I checked, my access to my student record and documents is still withheld, and VIU continues to claim that I do have access, but I don't. And so that's, the third and final effect of the suspension.
Based on some of the court documents related to the petition you filed with the BC Supreme Court, some of the reasons contributing to this suspension given were that you were reported to have entered an employee-only area in a building, caused damage to VIU property, affixed signs that the documents say were harassing in nature. You were reported to have been part of a group of individuals who brought a ladder to access the roof of a building. Do you dispute the reasons you were suspended? Do you feel like the severity of the punishment didn't match your actions? What are your specific issues with the suspension?
Lots to unpack here. The first and foremost is the suspension is disproportionate to, even if we do go with every single substantiated allegation VIU had, which I was investigated, I believe, for 7 and 4 were substantiated. If we agreed with and went with the 4, the 2-year suspension would still be disproportionate to the actions. It did not really make any sense, nor did it even meet their standard in the decision matrix. They have a standard that they're supposed to give numbers by, and they greatly exaggerated numbers. Not only that, the decision matrix they have is deeply flawed, and they were not really able to back up the ratings that they had put in. And so that is something we greatly dispute. The description of events they had is also interesting, I will say. They tended to use very inflammatory language to describe signs. And so, for example, they'll say signage that was harassing in nature, right? But again, what did the sign say that was so, and who did it harass, right? And they mentioned in court, one of the signs said, the boss of HR is racist, right? And they say, well, that sign is harassment towards the boss of HR, completely missing the context that the boss of HR, the head of HR at VIU, searched the bag of Muslim women in March of 2024. And so to describe that situation without that context, and even if there was no context, that sign is not inherently harassment. It just doesn't fit the criteria there. In terms of accessing restricted areas and, alleging that there was some sort of break-in happening after hours, that's completely false. That never happened. The door was open. There was no sign that said it was a restricted area. And so, like I said, all these allegations had very inflammatory language assigned to them to emphasize some sort of justification for the matrix that VIU put out to make the decision for the suspension. One of the allegations is a protest that had 25 people in it, yet only 2 were targeted and investigated, and they happened to be the 2 Palestinians. I find that a very difficult thing to ignore. And for VIU to have absolutely no evidence and also agree that I wasn't part of the disruption for one of those protests. And they actually claim that, yeah, I was there as a media liaison. I was there to record what's happening. Due to VIU's action against the students, due to their threats of calling the RCMP. So when we have someone that is there to observe, like a legal observer, to document what's happening, and for that person to be the one targeted, again, alarming action taken by VIU to target that person, and also alarming to then punish them and say that they are complicit in the noise making and disruption of the learning environment. And again, they had no testimonies of people that were actually disrupted. They say someone saw people being shaken up and shaking and distraught, yet none of the people that were shaken up or distraught ever came forward or gave any sort of testimony. So they based their evidence on what someone thought they had observed. Yet that someone, that their main witness here, is also someone that was caught up, not saying the full truth about things, and someone that was misrepresenting facts at numerous times.
Midcoast Morning reached out to VIU for comment. The university provided a statement that said the following. Vancouver Island University is responding to a court action brought by a former student who is asking the court to overturn a suspension decision. The student's suspension was upheld following an internal appeal process. The student has brought a judicial review application to overturn VIU's suspension decision. In their pleadings, the student alleges that their suspension resulted from participation in peaceful protest. VIU has filed documents that demonstrate the student was not suspended for taking part in peaceful protest. Rather, the suspension was a result of a breach of the student code of conduct, including vandalism, personal harassment, and accessing a secured building and disrupting other VIU activities. VIU's response also notes that the allegations of misconduct were investigated thoroughly and that the investigation, suspension decision, and suspension appeal decision were all conducted fairly with due process in accordance with VIU's policies and procedures for responding to student misconduct. The student has also alleged that the suspension prevented access to their academic records and has compromised their prospective academic endeavors. VIU's court materials demonstrate that the student has successfully graduated and has never been prevented from accessing their academic records. As this is a public court process, all the filed materials are in the public domain. VIU relies on the documents it has filed with the court and will not comment on this matter further at this time.
Midcoast Morning is part of our nonprofit newsroom project, supported by listeners like you. Keep this program on the air by funding it today with a monthly sustaining donation at chly.ca/donate. We've got tote bags and shirts if you need an incentive.
Today on the program, we've been hearing from former VIU student Sara Kishawi, who was speaking with me prior to the Watermelon Seeds Festival of Literature that was held at VIU last Saturday. Last fall, Kishawi, who has now graduated, was suspended by the school for a period of 2 years. She has petitioned the BC Supreme Court in an effort to have that suspension overturned. The BC Civil Liberties Association and the BC Federation of Students both intervened in the case on Kishawi's behalf. Court hearings were held in September. The court has not yet rendered its decision. So in the decision matrix that you referred to, which is included in some of the court documents, there's a rating from 0 to 10 that gets assigned to the severity of things. A number of these are rated 9, one of which it is written is that two staff have asked to work remotely as they no longer feel safe in the office and are concerned that protesters may try to conduct a sit-in at their workplace. Is that what you're referring to?
I was referring to, I believe this was the HR hallway access. I was talking about the thing.
Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe when you are trying to judge a situation or to assign some sort of rating to it, you need to be objective in that rating, especially on campus when there are a lot of students and vulnerable populations accessing education. And so to be able to rate every single incident objectively, you need to have some sort of standard, right? And when you do have that, you need to be able to get testimony from everyone involved, at least, and to balance that number, right? And so for people to ask to work remotely, because in that case, they were scared of a potential sit-in happening at their office. And what gave them the thought that that was going to happen was some posters that were put up. That is, I believe, is a mixing of, a mixing up of feeling unsafe with being uncomfortable. It is absolutely natural to feel uncomfortable or discomfort during a protest. That is, it happens. It can be loud, it can be disruptive, and it can be confusing, right? However, it's not an unsafe situation. There has never been an unsafe situation on campus by protesters, and that was, never the case. And if that was the case, then there would be, police reports, there would be all of these actions taken, right? And so to have that mixing up of feelings, especially when protesters are protesting against the genocide in Palestine, especially when most of the protesters were Muslim or people of color, and to have that inherent fear of them, that comes definitely from a place of racism and lack of understanding of the movement. We put partial blame of that on VIU because their statements were absolutely inflammatory of the encampment and of protests, right? But to blame a student and say that their impact was a 9 out of 10 because 2 staff asked to work remotely because they were scared of the potential of a protest. I mean, that's just a simply ridiculous statement. And VIU did mention damages, yet when asked more than one time, they couldn't name what the amount to the damages was. They said there was a door that had to be sanded, but again, why? Did they try to wash off the marker? It was a washable marker, right? And so it's to me, a person who has been witnessing a genocide, a person who's personally affected by the genocide that is happening, that is seeing such atrocious things coming out of Gaza, including that just that week at VIU, at the encampment alone, there was a journalist killed, and we watched it on our feed. It was on video. And to watch then a mother picking up her children's flesh after they were ripped apart by a bomb, for then a staff member at VIU who's clearly holding some racist views to come and say, oh, I'm scared of the potential of a protest that, by the way, has never harmed anyone, is, to me, just such a ridiculous statement to make. And I acknowledge that, yes, there may be some very big feelings of discomfort, and that's absolutely okay. And that's something that we can work with and we can have a conversation about. But to place a feeling of lack of safety because what you're presented with is a person of color, that is something that needs to internally be worked on, because it's absolutely not okay. And it causes a divide between people, and it justifies violence towards people of color.
Since the suspension, since the appeal process, there's been a change at the top of VIU. The former president, Deborah Saucier, resigned. There's a new interim president. Have you made any attempts to chat with him? Have you been able to talk to him about any of this?
Not yet. We will be making that type of attempt to speak to the new president. We did appeal to the president in terms of our statement, which we are sure that VIU, and we can see that VIU admin have access to and have seen, right? And so we are hopeful at least that the president is able to hear our appeal, and that the suspension can be removed before a court decision comes out and before VIU even further embarrasses themselves. And so there was that public appeal that was made. We have not reached out privately, but there is definitely plans to do that.
If you're okay to share, I understand that you grew up in Gaza City. You maybe still have family in the area. How's everything going on that front? Is everyone okay? It's
difficult to say. Nobody is okay after being constantly bombarded for 2 years, not knowing when the next meal is going to be, and eventually being displaced and living in a tent. It's hard to say that anyone is okay. They're alive. Most people are. But at the same time, at least every single person knows someone that was close to them that lost their life, that was killed by the Zionist regime. And so, no, they're not okay. Thank God for us. They're alive, most people. And so there is some hope there, but at the same time, no, they've been under genocide for 2 years. And I can't even begin to imagine the horrors that they felt and they still feel. I mean, we have a ceasefire in place right now. God knows how long that's going to last, and the implications of that. And so, like I said, alive, but definitely not okay.
Is there anything that you're going to be sharing at today's event?
Absolutely. I will have a speaking slot about, I think, after the intermission. And my focus today will be a topic of student activism and how it's, to me, and I'm exploring this still, but it's starting to become problematic to call it student activism. And so that will be the focus of my talk today. Maybe you can stick around and hear what it's all about. It's a 10-minute quick, maybe we should be, engaging all forces together rather than separating into student, scholar, or this type of activism. And I think these types of movements, especially when it comes to genocide, something as urgent as genocide, we all need to mobilize together rather than separate into, small segments. And while separating sometimes is beneficial, however, when there's an action, everyone needs to be mobilizing together. And that is something that I'm still exploring, but I will be touching on today for sure.
Former VIU student Sara Kishawi speaking with me prior to the Watermelon Seeds Festival of Literature held at VIU last Saturday, October 11th. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and generous listeners like you. Finally, this program gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.